those of you that have chosen to sit with us tonight and get an update from ODOT, thanks. We'll also have a CPO meeting, and we'll follow that with a Hamlet board meeting. There's an agenda which I think Katie Wilson has the ability, or maybe it's
Katie Kreider.
Katie Kreider has the ability. Katie someplace to, so you can see, there we go. I'm Bill Mark, I'm the chair. Katie Wilson will give you some of the rules of the road for those of you that haven't attended one of these before, and if you want to take that away.
Sure. Okay. Hi everybody, I'm Katie Wilson. I am the Community Involvement Liaison for the Hamlet program with Clackamas County, and we want to welcome all of you to the Stafford Hamlet meeting, and thank you for sticking with us with a Zoom meeting and learning the ropes with virtual engagement. We're all learning together, so please feel comfortable to test out the features this evening. If you would like to participate during the question and answer period, we want to invite you to use the raise hand feature. You will see that in probably either the lower portion of your screen, or if you're on an Apple product, it may be in the upper portion of your screen. If you raise your hand, that will let us know that you have a comment or a question, and during that open comment period, we will call on you to ask the board or the speaker questions. Again, look for the raise hand feature in order to participate. We look forward to hearing from you, and we hope that you enjoy the presentation tonight. So again, if you are new to the room, we want to encourage you to use the raise hand feature during the open comment period. That allows us to see who has questions or comments. You can look for that in the lower portion of your screen or the upper portion of your screen, depending on the type of device you're using. And again, we want to welcome you.
Thanks, Katie. So Lucinda Broussard will give us kind of a walking through of the process of the I-205 toll project. She was here a couple of, I don't know, 2 or maybe 2 months ago. And I don't know if you've got somebody with you or not, Lucinda, but if so, then you can introduce them. And we will turn it over to you. And again, just like Katie said to everybody, if you have questions that you want to ask, raise your hand. That will be kept in order. And after the program is delivered, it'll be available for questions. Thanks so much.
And if everybody on the board could please mute themselves.
Good to go? Good to go? Good evening. I'm Lucinda Broussard, Toll Program Director for ODOT, and I have with me Matt Delata. He's part of our consultant team from WSP, and he's going to talk a lot about the analysis that have been done on the alternatives. I'm going to give a general overview of the program, talk a little bit about where we are today and what we're doing, and then Matt will get a little deeper. He'll do a deeper dive. There'll be some numbers with Matt. I'm going to stay away from those tonight. Next slide, please. So as I said, I'm going to provide a project update and let you know where we are now. It's been about 2 months since we've been there, so I want to make sure that you're as current as we are and where we are, and then talk about the environmental review process. And then Matt will talk about the screening alternatives and analysis results. Next slide, please. Next one. So I think that, when we went last time, I'm not sure if 2 months ago, I think maybe we did have the EMAT going, the Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee. Maybe we had just started it, but we've started an Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee because we're focusing on equity through this toll project, through the toll program, really, as we get going, to have that focus on what's going on. We've also updated our Region 1 Act, our Area Commission on Transportation. We've done a lot of outreach. We have community engagement liaisons And we're using those to gather information and comments and questions from communities we normally do not hear from. So we have community engagement liaisons who are in their own communities. And what they do is they get with their friends, literally, and they have a conversation about what's going on in tolls. So we provide that information. And right now we're doing a 45-day comment period. They're able to look at the survey and make comments, and it's all in their own native tongue. So it's reaching people we normally wouldn't reach just because we're doing outreach now virtually. And how we reach people virtually is dynamic and changing as I speak, but our community engagement liaisons help us do that. We also have the regional modeling group, which is what Matt is part of and leads, and that's kind of talking about those alternatives and how we actually do the analysis on the data. And most regions, it's across the region. I think we even have somebody from Southwest Washington on that group too. So we're definitely not just thinking about what's going on right there in the community. We're involving anybody who comes through the community and has some longstanding needs there. You want to go to the next slide? So as I spoke about the Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee, I would say that this definitely is a hallmark here. I will tell you it's the first time that a toll program has ever done this in the country. I've gotten a lot of calls about it already because it's not done anywhere. Yes, we do take some measures for mitigation, but nobody's actually thinking about it and putting it in their program like you put quality in a program. The little comment bubbles you see here are a meeting we had, a listening session we had at the this was our July meeting, our June meeting. And it's right when it was COVID, but it was also civil unrest and what was going on. It's kind of the beginning of that, and to let our committee talk about what's going on. So I thought it was a great meeting. And as you can see, the comment bubbles are the questions that we asked during that meeting. And you can see that the second one at the top is, can tolls be equitable? It's a great question because it depends on what community you're talking to. So our committee represents professionals and folks who have lived experience in equity. I think they it's the broad range for sure of how equity can be applied. Next one. Our regional modeling group, which Matt is leading, we did have a data share. So we took all the data we used to come up with for the analysis that we have, that we're going to share some of the results with you tonight, actually. And that was all done and provided to everybody who's on the regional modeling group. And it's available out there now. So we shared the data, how we used it. We called it like a little timeshare meeting, because it was a couple of hours long and not only providing the data, but actually how we analyzed it. We provided all that information also. So from the regional modeling, you want to go back one? Cool. From the regional modeling group, what we're expecting is not only do we share the data, but we've come out and done some workshops regarding that data also, because it's when you start talking about it's for your community, what does that mean to you? And that's what the data is, regional and wide, and how people use it is for their community. We want to make sure that we provide the data, how we use it, and then help when you're trying to interpret that data for your communities. Next slide. So what we've heard over the last 3 years, I can say I've only been here 6 months, but I've heard these things the 6 months I've been here. And the first one really is, where and how is the revenue used? I think it's obviously the number one thing people want to know when we're out talking about we're collecting a toll. And what I can tell you is we're going to the Transportation Commission on Thursday, and we're asking that the revenue collected on a corridor stay on the corridor for any improvements there. So the tolls collected on I-205, revenue would not go to I-5, it would stay on that corridor. So that's one of the, we heard these things over 3 years, and one of the questions we asked ourselves was, has it changed, and what are we doing about what we've heard? So that's one of the things we're doing. And then there are 3 down here that we are definitely focused on for sure. The tolls are not equitable. That's our EMAC. We have our Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee. Clackamas County doesn't have enough transit service. We have a transit multimodal group, which is regional. And then the last one there is diversion. And Matt will talk more about that because that has a lot of analysis that goes with it. Next slide. As I said, it's been a while since we've been there, but I think we were talking about we were going to be doing our environmental review process, which we said was the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA. And we actually started that August 3rd. So we have a 45-day comment period, and it's to actually look at all the work we've done and say, give us your comments, give us your concerns, questions. We're looking for feedback. So this is really an engagement period for us. That's why we wanted to make sure we got back in front of you during this time. So that way you can participate. We have an online open house. The range of alternatives Matt will talk about. We have 5. We do have 2 recommendations, but everything we're doing right now is in draft. So we're taking all comments, and those comments will shape what we give to FHWA and what they accept to go ahead and post, and what we review when we get into the NEPA process, the National Environmental Policy Act process, which is after this 45 days. And we're looking at, I think I have a slide that'll give you a timeline of what we're looking at. But 45 days, we'll amass all the comments, and then we'll match those comments against what we're doing to see which ones, how do we change what we're hearing. So what are we going to be changing from what we're hearing? So that's part of what we're doing now. Next slide. And some of the ways we're engaging during this time. I talked about an online open house. We have an online open house with a survey open from now until September 16th. It's in English and Spanish. We also have our fact sheets and other information that's in 4 additional languages. So we're really trying to reach communities that we normally do not, that normally don't come forward. But we are trying to reach others, or talking to boards, councils like yourselves, committees. And then we're also meeting with advisory groups, and it's all about getting out the word that your comments are welcome, and we're looking for your feedback. Next one. I think I talked about this just a little bit when I talked about the things we've heard over the last 3 years. And basically is, what are we doing with your comments? And I think what we're trying to show is we're taking the comments in, we're making sure that we understand what it's asking us to do or commenting on. For instance, revenue, where does the money go? As a question. And we've kind of taken that all the way through, and now we're about to present it to Transportation Commission to make a decision on. So we're trying to make sure this feedback loop works. We receive a comment and we actually work the comment all the way to the end, and we notify people about what we did with the comment. Next. Here's our timeline for I-205 for the NEPA. The orange is where it starts, and that's not now. We're in front of that right now. We're at that 45-day comment period on our draft purpose and need, and the draft and the alternatives. We're not taking them all. We have 5. Only a couple of them are going forward. So we're trying to get down to those alternatives. Which ones are we going into NEPA with? And that's what we're really asking the public to help us with. Next one. Matt.
Okay, thanks, Lucinda. And thank you all for the opportunity to talk about our project with you today. So I'm going to run through first the purpose and need of the project and the goals and objectives and how that works for I-205, and then I'll jump into some of the results of our screening analysis after that. So purpose and need, that's sort of the fundamental why this project is here and the fundamental reason for it. So it's kind of a pass or fail thing, where either the project is successful at delivering on the purpose and need or not. Going a layer down are the goals and objectives. So these are kind of the desirable outcomes from the project in addition to the purpose and need statement. So this is what we use to compare and evaluate the alternatives in the environmental analysis, and we develop measures to support that analysis. Our project purpose for I-205 is really a dual purpose. So we're looking to manage congestion on I-205 between Stafford Road and Oregon 213 and raise revenue to fund congestion relief projects. So that's about using a variable rate toll, so a higher toll rate when there's a lot of demand and a lot of people want to be traveling, and a lower toll rate in other periods. And it's about kind of finding that spot in between that generates revenue and managed congestion. The Oregon Transportation Commission are the ones who will set the toll rates, and that'll happen after our environmental assessment. But overall, finding that balanced toll rate is part of the project purpose. Lucinda talked about the equity, and that's at the center of the decision-making process and the outcomes. The Equity and Mobility Advisory Committee, we talked about that, using their input to guide the process throughout. The goals and objectives will have an equity focus, we'll have equity-oriented evaluation criteria and performance measures, and we'll be using this to identify the ultimate project. In terms of the project need, just increasing congestion, which many of you who drive on this corridor are well aware of, long-term growth. We've also had some discussions about the greenhouse gas emissions and how that fits into some of the governor's goals. And funding to provide for congestion relief projects. The I-205 improvements project from Stafford Road to Oregon 213 has been identified previously and is included in the regional transportation plan. However, it's not funded. So goals and objectives, I won't read through this full list, but we talked about how there's equity-related measures, looking at diversion and traffic rerouting onto the local system, safety, on the local system, air quality, providing choices to people, and some of these other measures related to economic growth and demand management, and also fitting into the larger potential for a regional tolling system, which was identified in the previous phase of this work, the value pricing feasibility analysis. In terms of the environmental review, Lucinda talked about the 45-day comment period that's been initiated. That's where we're looking for your feedback on the purpose and need that I just ran through, the alternatives that I will run through momentarily, and just, we're looking for your feedback here. After that, we'll begin to prepare the environmental assessment, which will be detailed analysis looking across a range of disciplines on the impacts and benefits of the tolling project. So we'll have, follow up with a public comment period on that when that information is ready with the schedule that Lucinda outlined previously. Okay, so let me jump into the screening alternatives analysis results, the technical work we've done up to date. Before I jump into that, let me just explain a little bit about where this kind of fits into the overall project and the alternatives analysis framework. So we started with the value pricing feasibility analysis, which is more of a regional study. And part of the recommendations for that was a toll on I-205. That was called Concept E, and that was a point toll on the Abernathy Bridge. The findings from the feasibility analysis were that could successfully manage traffic and generate revenue, the project, the purpose and need of the project. Now, in this initial screening analysis, which is kind of the second piece of it, we're taking a step back and we're looking at 5 alternatives, not just the one that was recommended from value pricing feasibility, and trying to assess if there are different toll configurations and gantry locations that could have better outcomes than the initial concept. Can we do it better? We're really still looking at high-level measures, but we're using what we have readily available from the regional travel demand model. We're looking at it in 2027 and comparing these alternatives against each other to figure out if we can do it better. The environmental review, as we've discussed, is really where we get into the much more detailed level of analysis, evaluate the impacts, identify if there's any mitigation needed. At that phase, we're looking to narrow down to 2 or 3 alternatives for more detailed study at that phase. So we're trying at this screening level to narrow down from 5 alternatives to 2 or 3. Of course, eventually we hope to get to a preferred alternative that will get implemented in reality, recognizing that there be some refinements to the project, and once we identify the impacts and mitigations before it becomes reality. Okay, so I'm going to run through 5 alternatives that we've looked at in the screening analysis. So the first one is the toll on the Abernathy Bridge on I-205, single point toll. The virtues of that are it's pretty easy to understand, simple, but it's one toll rate and it's at one location. So it has limited ability to manage traffic operations and demand on the corridor. And we also saw from the value pricing feasibility analysis work that there was a concentrated rerouting effect through Oregon City. We looked at kind of a refinement of that alternative that placed gantries on either side of the bridge to capture anybody who's kind of getting off of I-205 and then jumping right back on after the toll. That's for the purposes of our evaluation, it's essentially equivalent to alternative 1 for now. Alternative 3 kind of splits the toll between 2 different locations. So there's the toll over the Willamette River, the Abernathy Bridge, and then the other half of the toll would be on the Tualatin River east of Stafford Road. So what that means is that if you're a through trip just traveling through on I-205, you wouldn't really see any difference in the toll that you pay. But if you're getting off somewhere in the middle in Oregon City or in West Lynn, you could essentially pay half the toll amount. Our fourth alternative is kind of extending that concept between Stafford Road and Oregon 213. So again, same concept for a through rate, you're generally paying the same amount, but if it's the more you travel along the tolled corridor, the more you'd pay. So if you travel all 4 segments, you'd pay a higher toll than if you traveled 1, 2, or 3 segments. That's the most flexible option from a traffic operations perspective. In the long run, you can manage traffic demand and adjust those toll rates, but it's a more complex pricing structure to communicate to people. Then there's alternative 5, our final alternative, which is also from Stafford Road to Oregon 213. But in this alternative, there's one toll rate. So regardless of how much you use, you pay the same amount, whether you're using one of the 4 segments within the toll area or all 4. So the analogy I've used there is that alternative 5 is sort of like a buffet. You pay the entry fee and you can use as much as you want, whereas alternative 4 is kind of like an a la carte, pay as you go. So for those of you who are more visually inclined, this graphic, it's a little bit hard to see, but essentially the orange areas are the pieces of I-205 where a traveler would get tolled. So for alternatives 1 and 2 on the upper left there, it's just the Abernathy Bridge. For alternative 3, again, we're splitting between these 2 different toll locations. In alternative 4, it's split in 4 locations. And then alternative 5 is at any entry point to this zoned area, there would be a single toll rate. Okay, so how are we evaluating these alternatives at this stage? We're looking at the transportation system demand. So that's how many vehicle miles are traveled on the transportation system, both for freeways and non-freeways, as well as how many vehicle hours, how much time people spend driving on the transportation system. We look at the volume on I-205, we look at the changes in volume on the surrounding roadway network, and we look at the potential shift from driving to other modes, whether that means shared ride or transit. We have several cost and revenue criteria. The key one there is the net toll revenues. How much could the project potentially raise to support some of these congestion relief projects that we've talked about or that have been identified in the region. And then we have implementation and operations, which are more qualitative criteria, and I'll run through those as well. Okay, so I'm going to start with what happens on I-205 itself. So all of these scenarios do show a volume reduction on I-205 within the tolled area. So depending on the alternative, it depends how much it is on each specific segment, but generally most of the segments would see 20 to 35% decreases in volume on I-205 over the course of the day. It's important to note that while this is happening at the daily level, the diversion, the shift of traffic I-205 is significantly more in those off-peak hours and significantly less on a percentage basis during the peak hours when the surrounding system is more likely to be congested. It's also important to note that, and this comes into play when I talk about sort of the regional perspective of the rerouting effects, is that immediately outside of the tolled area, those percentages very quickly decrease. So a lot of that is happening within the tolled zone. If you look to the west of the tolled area between I-5 and Stafford, the daily volume decrease is more like 10 to 20%. And to the north of the tolled corridor, near 82nd Drive, it's more like 5 to 10%. So when I talk about the regional rerouting, this is important context for that. Okay, so there's a decrease in volume off of I-205. Where does all that traffic go? A piece of it is rerouting to other roadways. I think that's generally intuitive to people. Take a different route. When I talk about the diversion effects, I'll talk about them both from the regional perspective further away and then locally near the tolled area. Generally, the regional rerouting is generally the same across all our alternatives, while the local shows quite noticeable differences between the different alternatives that I've talked about. So in addition to taking other routes, there's also the transportation demand component. So people actually changing how they behave. So that can mean leaving at a different time of day. That can mean changing their destination, where they're going, or it can mean changing their mode, essentially sharing a ride or taking transit. So at this stage, our kind of early modeling results do tell us a little bit about whether demand would change or not. So we have seen the potential for a reduction in single occupancy vehicle travel. People are driving alone less. The biggest shift there is people shifting to shared rides. So 4,000 to 5,000 additional shared ride trips over the course of a day. Or what we're not seeing a lot of is a shift to transit. With the assumptions that we have built into our 2027 network, we're seeing less than 500 trips per day shifting over to transit. So while we see some positive effects, the scale isn't necessarily dramatic on the demand side. So when I talk about transportation system demand, there's also the vehicle miles traveled on the system. So what happens to the surrounding roadway network? All of these alternatives are showing a decrease in vehicle miles traveled. And they're also showing a decrease in vehicle hours traveled. So people are generally, there's fewer cars on the roads and people are spending less time driving. However, we are seeing a shift in a lot of that reduction is happening on the freeway itself, and a lot of the time savings are being realized on the freeways itself, whereas we see some increases potentially in the non-freeway system, consistent with sort of that diversion story I described previously. It's important to note that these shifts are generally happening, again, mostly in those off-peak hours, less so in the peak hours. In terms of the regional transportation system, this isn't a huge shift, but it's something that could be noticeable in the local area for sure. So I'm going to jump through some of the diversion information that we have, how the rerouting patterns occur as a result of this tolling. So one of the very logical thoughts and kind of going into this that I think a lot of people have is, well, if you toll I-205, aren't a bunch of people are going to jump over to I-5? And we're not really seeing that much of that. We are seeing some increases on I-5, particularly closer to Portland. So over the course of the day, these are generally 0 to 2% or maybe 2 to 5% increases. Closer to I-205, we're actually seeing some potential for some small decreases. These are daily effects. And again, I've kind of said it a couple of times, but we're seeing bigger shifts in the off-peak hours and the peak hours. During the peak hours, these are really negligible shifts over to I-5. I-5 is already congested during the peak hours today, and there's not really a lot of room for other traffic. Looking further out into the regional system, some of the same thing, very small changes at the regional scale. We looked at US 26, I-84, I-205 further to the north. No really significant increases, particularly during these peak hours when congestion is most severe. As we start getting closer to the tolled area, we start seeing some more noticeable impacts. So in Lake Oswego, in Oregon 43, just south of Terwilliger Boulevard, we see 5 to 10% increases in traffic volume over the course of the day. On Stafford Road, between Wilsonville and I-205, we actually see volume decreases as Stafford Road is a primary route to access I-205, and as I-205, the demand for travel on I-205 decreases with the toll volume on Stafford Road could also decrease. Where we do see the potential for a significant increase is in Canby on Oregon 99E and through that corridor. That's a pattern that we'll need to address. It's something that we've seen through the previous work in the value pricing feasibility analysis and has still shown up in our modeling work to date. Borland Road is kind of an interesting story and I think worth describing. So the results vary depending on which location you look at. So Borland Road east of 65th Avenue on the east side of Tualatin, you really don't see much of an increase there. The piece of I-205 between I-5 and Stafford Road is not tolled. So there isn't a significant rerouting pattern showing up on Borland Road, on that piece of Borland Road. Excuse me. East of Stafford Road, we do see potential for a very significant volume increase depending on the alternative that you look at. And that's because the piece of I-205 that runs parallel to it is tolled in some of these alternatives. In terms of our rerouting, rerouting and diversion are at the forefront of a lot of people's minds when we talk about tolling. So I just want to explain where we're at with that. So in the feasibility analysis, we looked at these big regional concepts and we just identified which roadways are potentially going to be impacted by rerouting. At this level of analysis, we're trying to refine that analysis and say, well, how big of a potential impact is it at all these key locations where we're seeing potential for rerouting, and how does it change over the course of the day during the peak hours and off-peak hours, and what does it roll up to at the daily level? In the environmental assessment, that's where we really get into the more detailed analysis and look at whether traffic operations are able to handle that volume, particularly during those peak hours when there's may already be congestion in place. So can the surrounding system handle that? And that's where we get into the more traditional traffic engineering approach for the analysis. Cost and revenue, generally these were intended to be pretty revenue neutral and similar, and they generally are. We did see a slightly higher net toll revenue potential in alternative 4 than some of the other alternatives, but generally they're similar in line. And again, the net toll revenue is important for the piece of how much funding it can generate for congestion relief and other projects. Okay, so I talked a little bit, those are sort of our modeling results, our technical analysis. We also have sort of a qualitative piece of this to think about. So there's kind of considerations about how well these different alternatives are able to manage traffic operation in the long run as demand changes. How flexible is it? Are any of these scenarios, or to what extent these scenarios are likely to create sort of hotspots of diversion or rerouting? Are there any concentrated impacts that would be really difficult to address? Is the concept understandable to drivers? What do the collection costs look at? We're also looking at the potential for tolling more regionally. That was part of the value pricing feasibility analysis, to toll most of I-5 and I-205 throughout the metro area. So how can, this is sort of the first for Oregon, right? Or or at least for our metro area, to toll a highway. So how does that translate to a wider system is also an important consideration in our work. Okay, so we did all this analysis and we tried to boil it down into kind of a high-level summary to guide our recommendations for what we would study further in the NEPA process. So we looked at those categories that I described before: transportation system demand, traffic on I-205, diversion, costs and revenues, and implementation and operations. And we compared all these alternatives against each other to identify which ones performed better or worse. And where that ended up is with an initial recommendation from our project team to study alternatives 3 and alternatives 4 further. So again, alternative 2 is the one that splits the toll at both of the bridges crossing the rivers, and alternative 4 splits the toll between all 4 segments. We're not recommending to advance alternatives 1 and 2 for further study, or alternative 5 for further study. So the rationale behind this is generally that alternative 3 was generally performing better than alternative 1. Alternative 1's big flaws that had a really concentrated rerouting effect through Oregon City. Alternative 4 has the greatest flexibility in the long term, translates best to kind of a regional system. And we felt we'd have the most kind of long-term control about achieving the project objectives in that option. We also saw it as a benefit of the sort of pay-as-you-go approach, where a local access trip could have a lower toll than somebody who's passing through. Again, another thing that can help with diversion and rerouting. Whereas alternative 5, well, it had some virtues, charging everybody the same thing, kind of resulted in some challenges from the implementation side and tended to create concentrated rerouting effects on the edges, on the outside parts of the tolled areas, and that included through Gladstone. And so that's where our team has landed so far with these initial recommendations based on the technical work we've done. And we really look forward to hearing from you all if these are the right alternatives to move ahead with, and the public as this goes out for comment.
So what's next? Go ahead to the next one. More briefings. It's engagement, and that's what we're looking for, engagement and participation. So as you can see, we are out a lot. I think tonight we were double booked between Gladstone and here. So some of us are over there and we're over here. So we're making sure that we get the word out. You want to go to the next one? I think that's have your say. I talked about the online open house, www.oregantolling.org. You can take the survey there. It actually goes through the alternatives that Matt talked about in more detail, has lots of the reports that we've used. So everything is there on that online open house. We're also having webinars, and we're having one tomorrow actually from noon to 1, kind of like a panel setting. I'm thinking of it like a radio talk show, just to get what's going on in tolling, and we'll have the same kind of briefing we've done for you this evening. So if you have comments and you just want to email them, there's a way to do that. Voicemail, there's a way to do that. Any way that you can get them to us, we're taking them. Next slide. And here's our contact information. And I know we have one question already. And it was from Jana. Jana? Is it Jana? It was Jana. It was in the comments. It was in the chat box. And it was what congestion relief projects are at Stafford, Hamlet. And at this point, they haven't been identified. I don't think there are any identified. But as we go through the environmental review and the assessment, there might be pockets of places we need to do some work. And having that revenue dedicated to that corridor will help us get there. Jana, does that answer your question?
I'm sorry, my internet went bad for a moment, so I missed part of it. But I guess it sounded as if you had specific projects in mind for congestion relief.
No, the fund is just called a congestion relief fund, and that's how the legislature set it up. So it goes to congestion relief projects. And right now there are 2, of course. This one that we're doing here in I-5 between Multnomah and Going.
Okay. So the funds raised through tolling will be used to develop further tolling? I guess I'm confused what the funds raised from tolling on this corridor would be used for.
So it could be used for transit, could be used for park and ride lots, transit, all except buying a bus. I think that constitutionally we can't do that, but helping with other modes, we can do that. So it's really to provide some improvements and actually to help with mitigating some of the issues that we may bring with tolling. I noticed Matt's phone number is not complete.
Sorry about that.
Someone put that in chat too, so we'll get that back out.
We can provide that, yeah.
Yeah. Clackamas County versus ODOT. Can somebody, oh wait, there's one before that. Who will be responsible to review specific impacts on alternative routes, i.e. the problematic intersection of Eck and Borland? You know where those, it's in your chat, Matt.
Yeah, I am not seeing the chat, but yeah, we are developing currently together with ODOT a methodology and approach for the transportation technical report, which will dive into which locations and study intersections would sort of get the more detailed analysis of traffic operations. So that's when we look at sort of the existing conditions, what it's going to look like in 2027 and 2040 without the project in place, and then what it looks like with the project in place. And so at each of these intersections, there's mobility standards identified, generally based on how congested the intersections get. And if tolling is kind of creates diversion effect that will essentially exceed that mobility standard and the delays will be too high, then we would identify that as an impact of the project and what mitigations would be needed for that diversion effect. And so in terms of who's reviewing that methodology report and that detailed traffic analysis, and it will go out to our partner agencies for review and comment.
So Lucinda and Matt, we have a couple raised hands. Can we take the first question from John Keith?
Thank you for the presentation. I appreciate you being here. One of the other main diversion routes is Johnson Road from Stafford Road through West Lynn. I would recommend you add that to your analysis. I mean, we live on Johnson Road, and during rush hour, we calculate 70 vehicles per minute running by the road. So it's a highly used area, probably just as much as Borland. So I would recommend you do that. Also, in terms of diversion calculations, can you demystify and make it simple how you determine those volumes and those impacts?
Yeah, so the volumes are based on our work at this stage, and it's important to note they are still preliminary, but we're leaning on the regional travel demand model, which is kind of a primary tool within our region to identify differences between scenarios and the long-term forecast, the long-term needs and demand on these roadways. So what we do
Can you kind of explain how that works, though? I mean, for
regional
those of us
travel
who don't do it every day, I mean, we don't understand how you say it's 10% less or 40% more.
Sure. Yeah, so what we would do is we use the regional travel demand model, and it determines how many people want to travel from one location to another, and then it figures out the most efficient routing, the shortest travel time from A to B. And it does that throughout our entire region. And so once it sort of does its work, it'll identify how much volume is on each of these roadways. And what we do is we compare sort of the baseline, the no toll scenario, kind of the regional default to one of these toll scenarios. And if it increases the volumes, we say, right, it's an increase by 30%. If it decreases, it's a decrease by such and such a percent. So we're really comparing these two different alternative scenarios to figure out how much traffic volume could change.
How's that validated? I mean, you come up with a model with a number. How do you validate that the model actually is exactly accurate?
Yeah, there's a standard process that the it's Metro's regional travel demand model. So they go through and they evaluate it against traffic count data. They go through, it's based on household travel behavior surveys, and then they validate it against counts. And there's a standard process. These kind of models are used nationwide, and all the major cities have them, and smaller communities as well. So they all have to go through a validation process and meet certain criteria to be acceptable for use.
So that's a little rubber tube running across the road. Those are traffic counts, kind of things.
Yeah, traffic, right. So traffic counts traffic count data is collected, and it can be collected through tube counts. That's right. It can also be collected through, ODOT has like automatic traffic recording stations throughout the region that capture travel time more broadly. So those are either, those can be also in-road vehicle sensors, but generally, yes, tube counts is the most common way to capture those counts.
One last question. Thank you for one last question. So is the alternative of no tolling not an alternative? I mean, is that just not off the table?
It is it will be an alternative. There will be a no build kind of a baseline alternative that will be on this. In our screening analysis, we're comparing build alternatives against each other with the idea that we'll identify a better version. But in the NEPA analysis, yeah, absolutely, the no toll option will be one of the alternatives considered.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
The next question we have is from Richard Fiala.
Hi, thanks for taking my question, and appreciate you guys being here tonight. I want to make sure I understand the revenue raised on tolling beyond going towards the construction costs of the widening. Those funds would be used on county roads as well as state roads? Is that true? Or is the additional revenue raised for congestion relief only going to be targeted specifically to state roads?
So I don't know, and I will get back to you on exactly where it would be targeted. What we're saying is revenue that's generated after all the bills are paid. What's left over would be dedicated to that corridor for improvements along the corridor.
The problem with that, though, is that the corridor that we're all in right here, there is only one state road, or it's 205. Now, okay, the extra revenue goes over to I-5. That does nothing for Borland, Stafford, Johnson, so on and so forth. I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but if we knew that those funds, those additional revenue, could come over to the county roads, well, that is at least something that we could hold in our hands and say, okay, well, this is one reason why we're paying for this. But if it's only going to go to state roads, that really doesn't do us any good, because the next state road is over in Oregon City, far side of West Lynn, or I-5. Thank you.
I will ask the question and I'll make sure you get the answer.
That'd be awesome. Thank you so much.
Not a problem.
So the next question is from Steve Scott. Steve, if you could turn on your mic.
Actually, it's Nancy Scott.
Oh.
Sorry about that.
Sorry.
It was my question. Oh, no, you are fine. It was my question about the impacts on alternative routes. I live on the intersection, at the intersection of Eck and Borland, and the, those of us who are here familiar with it know that it's a problematic intersection, and there is FYI, you may be aware of this, there is a proposal for a large sports complex at the corner of Eck and Borland, and they've done extensive traffic studies. I don't know if you've seen those, but they said that the counts for now are not exceeding, they're right there though. They're not exceeding the safety state standards for, I don't know what's called a minor arterial. I'm not exactly sure what Borland is. But, I have a funny question related to that though. Number one, I really appreciate Mr. Fiala asking that, because when the traffic starts going on at the intersection of Eck and Borland, someone is going to need to improve that intersection. There's just no doubt. Somebody's going to have to do it. And we have lots of anecdotal information about the problems with that intersection. And I don't, again, want to beat a dead horse. But I have kind of a funny question though. One, is it, and I know you don't know this, but is it going to be 50 cents that you're going to save if you come on Borland, or is it going to be $5? Because people will, if it only costs them 50 cents to go from Stafford, past Oregon City, they'll probably do it. If it's going to cost them $5, they may take Eck and Borland. So do we have any idea? I mean, what did you base the alternative routes on? Because don't you think, I mean, I think economics and the cost of it has to impact that.
So Matt's gonna answer what they use for the analysis, and I'll answer about the toll rates. So the Oregon Transportation Commission sets the toll rates, and that's not gonna happen until after this process is completed, which is a couple of years from now.
Okay.
So at this point, we don't know what the toll rate is, but Matt can talk about what toll rate they use for the analysis.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, so we base the toll rate assumptions for the through trips based on the value pricing feasibility analysis, and as the toll rate would vary over the course of a day. And so we've, at this point for our modeling work, we have to make some sort of assumptions, and we recognize that those aren't the final results. So we're assuming no toll overnight, and then the highest, and then kind of 4 different tiers of tolling, you know, depending on the level of demand and tolling. So it varies depending on the time of day on kind of a fixed schedule.
Is there any rough estimation or anything based on other projects like this? I mean, I think that is going to be a huge impact and a huge factor on whether people, you know, take the alternative routes.
At this point, no.
Okay.
We'll know more in a couple of years.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're more than welcome.
So we have another question in chat from Rick Cook. It's a question about tolling milestones compared to construction timetable. Rick, do you want to clarify what your question is? Rick, are you still on?
Yeah, just couldn't get me in. Yeah, just curious how the milestones compares or runs along with the construction, which we don't know when that's going to start. But is there any link between what you guys are doing and when the construction timetable starts?
No, actually, I think I seen we have money through design, not construction, and we would start construction 2024. We would start tolling about 2024. So it would be in parallel.
Okay. Then just one other question real quick, if I could.
Sure.
With Wilsonville's development of 2,000 homes at the end of Stafford, when it hits Wilsonville, in their application to enter into the urban growth boundary, they said that 40% of that traffic is coming north on Stafford to 205. Is that even in your rearview mirror at all when you evaluate that?
The regional travel demand model makes land use assumptions. That's a key input into the regional model. So the growth that's anticipated in terms of employment and households in Wilsonville that was reviewed by the city of Wilsonville is what's included in that model. And that's consistent across all of our alternatives. So those future growth assumptions should be included in the regional modeling work.
Operative word being should. I hope it is.
Okay, are there any other questions? If you have a question, I want to encourage you to use the raise hand feature to let us know that you have a question or comment. This is the last call for questions or comments. So we have one from Rick Fiala.
Hi. So a generalized question here for you. What government entities other than ODOT have expressed total support for this tolling project? Thank you.
I would think you meant like Metro, PBOT. Congestion management is something that a lot of the authorities are saying, yes, we need to do in the Oregon area.
But what about like the people along the 205 corridor?
You know, we had a survey that
Morgan City and so on.
Yeah, so I would say that for the improvements, I haven't heard against for the improvements.
No, specifically tolling.
Yeah, for tolling to pay for those improvements, yes. But tolling, no.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Katie, I got one more. I can't find my button.
Oh, okay, you go ahead and then it's Bill's turn.
Oh, sorry, Bill, but thank you. Curious, so is this going to be in perpetuity where they will never take the toll off the area, or is that something that once it's in, it's there forever?
So that's a choice by, am I unmuted? I am. Oregon Transportation Commission determines that. If it's bonded, are they going to pay it through the bonds? If not, are they going to leave it on? Don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and Bill, Mark?
I raised my hand only because I felt like our scope or time is somewhat limited here, and I wanted to thank Lucinda and Matt both for the time and information. We're going to have to move on to the next portion of our meeting. So those of you that didn't get a chance to ask a question or have a question that you could either email or phone in or text, I'm sure Matt's phone number is available someplace other than up on the screen. That'd be great. But we're going to have to move on, folks. So again, thanks for doing this. As always, some more new good information. It's a lot of thought has definitely gone into this. So, and some really good questions from the audience. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Have a
Thank
great
you.
evening.
Okay, so next up is our CPO meeting. Unfortunately, our CPO chair has, unless he showed up. Oh, there he is, Len Schaubert. Take it, Len. I didn't think you'd made it into the collective here. So if you'd like to run through what you've received in the last month, that would be great.
Hey,
Well,
Bill.
thanks for the intro. Sorry for being late because my computer decided to go elsewhere for a while. All we have is some land use approvals that came in. One that came in April. I'm not sure if it even got sent out or not. But there was an approval for Festive Hill Winery on Johnson Road. They were looking for approval for a wine tasting room and associated use, which was approved. The application file number on that is Z0111-20-PDR for reference, where you can contact Clackamas Zoning from Clackamas Planning at clackamas.us/planning. Second one, actually yesterday, we have two approvals down on Bowling Road. Well, one's on Bowling Road, one's just off of San Rivera. But the one on Bowling Road was for replacement of a new home, the same footprint of a current home that's there, and that's at 1145 Southwest Bowling Road. And the file number on that is Z0288-20-HDA. Second approval is at 1165 Southwest Bowling Road, and this was for the replacement of a damaged roof on a historic structure. And you'd be surprised how much detail they go into explaining how that's applicable. Anyhow, they approved that so they can replace the roofing material with other than initial shake material, which isn't really available anymore or even safe. So that's approved. And that case file number for that was Z0265-20-HR. And other than that, nothing earth-shattering has been happening, and that's what we like to keep it.
Thanks, Lynn. There are a couple other things under the CPO heading. One is that we're going to include elections for CPO officers when we do our elections for the Hamlet and that will be combined with our community vision plan vote as well. So there'll be three different agendas, I guess, that are all going to blend together for both efficiency and so that folks can not feel like they have to either get involved in voting on multiple days. Right now, that's looking like it's going to be on an online venue that Katie Wilson has been working with the county staff. We don't have a definitive answer yet, and I think some of that is based on the cost. But as of right now, we're aiming for hopefully the fourth part of November, but stay tuned and we'll have a specific date and a specific method for accomplishing that. And I believe that's it. It should be noted that, for instance, Nancy Scott that called in that lives at the intersection of Borland and Eck is in the CPO, but not in the Hamlet. And so should she or any of her neighbors that are in that situation want to be involved in the CPO, this would be a great opportunity for her or us both to get some more folks to help Len out. And if you have questions, certainly I'm available, Len's available. Any number of us can probably walk you through how that process or the responsibilities involved. But it isn't being in the CPO. Everybody that's in the Hamlet is in the CPO, but not everybody that's in the, everybody that's in the CPO is in the, everybody that's in the Hamlet is in the CPO, but not everybody that's in the CPO is in the Hamlet. Oof. Not that complex, but I wasn't saying it right. Okay, so that is all I think we've got, unless Len had something else for our CPO meeting. We're going to take 5 minutes and allow Katie and Garrett, who have put this meeting together from the county, to kind of walk through how Zoom meetings work, because there are some folks from the various CPOs that hopefully have tuned in on this and are seeing how this process goes. You folks want to take it from there?
Yeah, I'm happy to comment. So the county has chosen Zoom as our basic platform for virtual meetings. We did that quickly when everything happened with COVID-19 and so many people moving to remote and the public health orders that were coming down to socially distance. And Zoom has proven to be a user-friendly tool. And that is the primary reason why it was chosen by the county as our primary virtual tool. We have been encouraging Hamlets and CPOs to use it and providing support when necessary to allow our community groups to continue to meet. So if you have questions or concerns about Zoom, or you're unsure how to attend a county meeting, we do have some resources available on the county website to walk you through how to access the BCC meetings, for example. But I am available as a community liaison to help you. Zoom is something that you can access through your computer, but if you don't have internet, you can also access Zoom meetings by telephone. So that's a great feature. The other great thing about Zoom is it doesn't require you to download an app, which some of the other platforms do require. So we did appreciate that made it more user-friendly as well. We do have some CPOs that are hosting their meetings on their own Zoom platforms. Others are utilizing the county Zoom platform as a resource. And so we are encouraging virtual engagement, and we are also learning as we go. We do have some new resources we've developed to help community members better utilize virtual tools and to help their users better utilize virtual tools. So if you're interested in those, we are completely willing to share. I hope that helps.
Yeah, and we are, you know, moderately a little ahead of schedule. So if there's any folks out there that want to ask a question at this point, use the little raise hand feature, just like you did on the ODOT tolling presentation. Otherwise, if you folks don't see anybody, you Garrett or you Katie that that has their little hands up, or Katie Kreider, we'll move on to the board meeting. So I'll be blank here for just a second and let you folks look.
If questions come up, Bill, please forward them to me. I'm happy to help.
Great, thanks so much.
No problem.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the board meeting. It's called to order. We have an agenda, which I think was up on the screen at one point. I don't know if Katie Kreider can do that again. But I think we need to approve the agenda unless there's a problem. Then I guess we need to add or subtract something. There you go. Thanks so much. So do I have a motion to approve the agenda as shown? And who's ever going to make that motion has to take themselves off mute.
So moved. It's John.
Thank you. Thanks, Jen and John. All those in favor of approving the agenda as written, I guess, signify by raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, all those opposed? Pretty quiet. All right, thanks so much. Next item, CDP update. So, Katie, do you want to step in and
Sure.
know where we are as far as you know at this point?
Yeah, so we have been investigating options for remote voting. That's to cover both your community vision plan and your board member elections. And we've also been discussing the possibility of including your CPO election as well in that process. We've investigated quite a few options for how to safely conduct voting for each hamlet. We do have 3 in the county. We've explored everything through drive-through options to socially distanced in-person voting and also virtual options. And right now what we are narrowing in on is the virtual option, because with the ever-changing protocols and recommendations for public health regarding COVID-19, it seems like the safest option. So we've been running some testing. We've provided some test data to a vendor called Election Buddy, and it's looking very promising. And so we have a meeting set up next week for them to go over how the test data worked with us, and to go over pricing to make sure that there's not anything prohibitive with this particular option. So once we get a little more detail, I'd like to check in with Hamlet leaders to make sure that we have met all of your needs before we go live with any virtual voting tool, but it's looking very promising. This is a tool that could also be a great thing for the county to have for other community groups as well. But this is a good pilot to test out with the Hamlet elections and timely. So we are doing our best to stay on track with the time frame for the Hamlet elections. And so I just hope you stay tuned, and hopefully there'll be a stakeholder meeting shortly with Hamlet leaders to go over all the final details.
Katie, this is Rich.
Hey.
Best guess what it's going to cost us?
So they have an annual plan that we are focused in on that gives us, for this particular round, a membership to do 3 elections, which would meet our needs for this year for the Hamlets.
Right.
And they haven't given us a complete estimate. They have a bunch of different services that they can provide, everything from doing the postcards for us to hosting and counting the votes. So we need to review all of those services before I could give you an accurate number.
Okay.
It's not cheap, but it also doesn't appear to be terribly expensive.
Okay. Is it something that probably would be in the scope that the county can cover because of the deficit issues?
Yes, we are committed to supporting the elections the best we can. So we have commitment from county leadership to find a way to do this.
Good enough. Thank you.
Yeah.
Katie, I have a question. So is it going to be totally virtual, or is there a chance to be in person as well, or mail, or?
So that's one thing that I want to chat with Hamlet leaders about, and we do have a question into Election Buddy. They have some options to provide for folks who may or may not have access to internet. We want to be as inclusive as possible, but we also need to be mindful of resources. So I think one of the things we've looked into is the possibility of providing my contact, and we could provide paper ballots to those who need it via mail. But we're exploring what all of their options are. We of course want to be mindful of those who may have challenges accessing a virtual tool.
Thank you.
Yeah. It looks like someone else has their hand raised. Bill, do you mean to have your hand raised? Bill Mark?
No, I don't mean to have my hand raised. However, Patty did.
Okay.
You're muted, Patty.
You're not muted. It's just not coming through.
Oh.
If you put it in chat, Patty, I'll answer your question.
Okay, so just a sidebar here, and then we'll move on. Our CPO bylaws state that the election is supposed to be in February for CPO office or CPO board. With the flexibility that obviously is taking place, that is voting in a different format, et cetera, and the fact that there is obviously some serious constraints, do you see a problem with us combining this so that whether it ends up being November or as late as January that we do the vote, that it not being in February would be a problem?
I don't think there's a problem. Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure. I don't think there's a problem with doing the election early. Those officers would just not take office until the end of the term of, the previous officers. My only concern with this, the only thing I need to check out with the Election Buddy is to make sure that it doesn't substantially increase the cost, because what that technically would do with this virtual tool is count as 2 different elections, because we'd have 2 different mailing lists for the CPO and the Hamlet. I don't know that that's a deal breaker, but that is a question that we have into them. It's possible. I just need to make sure that it's something that we have the resources for. So I will get back to you about that. But as far as the time frame and combining them, I don't think there's a problem with doing the CPO election early. We just would follow the bylaws as to when the new CPO leadership would take office.
Excellent. Okay, so while you're still on the horn and are not muted, the annual sit down that the county commissioners have with us we were at the last meeting, we had talked about August. Have you heard any more about that? And I assume it's going to be virtual again.
It will be virtual. I don't have a date set for that, but I will get back to you as soon as we have something solid.
Okay. Great.
Patty does have her question.
Oh, Patty, let me see your question. Hold on. Thank you, Garrett. I have to figure out the time frame for election, Buddy. We do need to give lead time for Hamlet residents. We have let Election Buddy know what our tight time constraints are for this. And so I am, like I said, we're meeting next week with the Election Buddy folks to get kind of their final information to run through the test results of the tool and to learn a little bit more. So I'm hoping that we will have a meeting with Hamlet leadership shortly after that, within the next couple weeks. And that way we stay on track with getting the postcards out like we normally do to Hamlet residents to let them know the protocol for the elections this year. We do need to talk about when you guys want to do your election, because I know there's been discussion about whether or not to have it in November or January. We have done it both ways for you folks. December's really challenging for an election with all of the holiday commitments that folks normally have, although who knows what that's going to look like this year for so many families. So, you know, I'm happy to have that conversation another time if we want to talk a little more in depth about timing for the election.
Yeah, that would probably be better to do that at a different time. But yeah,
sure.
The more we can do to push this thing along, the better, because we still would like to have a town hall to reacquaint people with the CDP
sure.
before the vote. So
sure.
Okay. Next up is the approval of minutes. You all were mailed the minutes by Kate Roth, both for the last community meeting and the board meeting. Is there anything that anybody saw that needed to be corrected? And if not, then will somebody make a motion to approve both of those minutes?
I move to approve those minutes.
Thanks, Jane. Anybody a second?
Second.
Thanks so much. Okay, so minutes have been approved, seconded. All those in favor, say aye or raise your hand. There's a bunch of thumbs ups. Okay, all those opposed. John Key's thumb is still up from, okay, we're good. That was a whole bunch of folks. I would say that was unanimous. Thanks. Okay, treasurer's report. Bill Long. Bill Long has been working mightily to resolve the ins and outs and nuances, and I will let him talk to you about where we are both with the budget and where we are on the finances. Take it, Bill.
Yeah, picked up the bank statement Saturday afternoon and got into it Sunday. And in my figures, they didn't match the banks like they had been doing. And I called Joe and I called Bill, and we spent several hours today. And I've got a Joe Wyckoff approved, reconciled figures that's accurate and good. And I learned a lot today. We have, and this will come at you in hard copy. I've slammed as Bill knows today and tomorrow a little bit. But the reconciled bank statement, we have $25.05 and 58 cents in the bank. Deducted from that, however, is something that I didn't pass on to the county, and I want to give them complete information, Katie, that they should also deposit 455 wine sales, Rick, into the trust account. And anyway, that gives us a net of $2,050.58. But also in the Saturday mail was a check for $2,000 from the county. And that was kind of neat. And I'll have that in the bank tomorrow. We'll be street legal. That will give us $4,050.58 to play with for postcards. and whatever.
Great.
So that's all I can say. Any questions or anything? I'll be sending you all.
Thanks for your effort, Bill.
Thank you.
Effort and
It's not as simple a
tenacity.
job as I thought it was going to be.
Amen, brother. Okay, we see. We've got. Well, maybe we should just say this out loud. This afternoon, Brandon Post sent a letter to the board that he's going to resign from the board. He's still willing to help in some capacities. He's got a lot of skills that we've taken advantage of up to this point, but I think with all the time he's spending online on doing his work and with the disruption to his family's life, this just wasn't working out for him. So we appreciate his time, appreciate all he's done up to this point, and hopefully we can utilize some of the skills going forward, but we're going to have to find somebody to replace him in our election in either November or January. Committee reports. I think some of that's been shared. If you look on the opposite page, you can see what some folks have sent in. Under programming, I think our next, if I'm not mistaken, Jen, our next board meeting is scheduled for September 8th. Yeah, September 8th. And our town hall date is going to depend on our vote date, and we don't have that yet. Communications, I don't believe the communications committee met, but if Katie or Patty or Jana or Len, you can correct me if that's not the case. Is anything else you want to say about programming, Jana or John?
I don't think we have anything scheduled for September, John, do we? Speakers?
No, we don't have anything.
I guess we don't really have a plan for September other than just normal meeting potentially.
Okay. Let's see. So Family Fest obviously is on hold until next year. Volunteers. That's where there's been definitely some activity. Patty, it sounds like we're not going to make it for the dates that we had chosen for next week. I think you had joined the meeting by the time Katie and Garrett said that we could do the 26th, that would work. That's a Wednesday. Did you catch that, Patty Manuela? Oh, Patty Manuela has to nod her head.
It might be off now.
Did she give
I don't see her name.
Okay, well.
Hung up. Can I throw out an idea really quick? Because that's a whole separate meeting. Would it be like sort of time efficient for us to actually put that volunteer section as the community portion of the September 8th meeting? So that we just basically say, hey, we're going to talk about a little bit what volunteers can do. Here's some stuff, ask your questions, and then, like it could be shortened half hour or whatever. Or should it be separate? I guess I'm thinking Katie and Garrett are just like meeting like every day. So if we could combine, I wonder if that would be productive,
that's a great idea.
Counterproductive.
I agree.
John, I think like that.
Yeah.
Patty, did you hear that? Patty, can you hear me?
Patty cannot hear me. All right, I'll email her.
Okay, and just let me know. That date I think works for us because we already have it on our calendar to support that meeting.
Okay.
But we will support whatever is most effective for you guys to communicate with your community. So I don't want you to feel bullied into changing your plan for us.
No, but I think the advantage of that is if maybe that a few more folks than just the folks that signed up to be volunteers or to find out more about being volunteers would show up, which wouldn't be the case if we just stuck with the 30 folks that threw their name in the hat after the last 2 town halls. So I think that's, that's, again, that's a great idea in my mind, unless somebody sees a problem with it. I think that's a good idea, Jen.
Does anyone think it's not a good idea? Can you unmute yourself and say?
Patty did put a comment in chat. She didn't hear the initial ask. Her internet stopped and she had to reboot.
Oh, okay. So what we had tentatively talked about was moving the volunteer orientation to the 26th, but Jana just brought up if we don't have anything on the board for the community meeting on September 8th. So do that at the community meeting versus a whole separate meeting for just volunteers. It's more efficient for the staff because they've already got to be here anyway. And maybe we pick up a few more folks. Do you see a downside? Yes or no? Patty Manuel. Did you get it then? Did you hear that?
Patty, give us the thumbs up if you heard Bill.
Huh.
Oh, wait.
Yes.
I think she's just having connectivity, yeah.
She's freezing.
Poor thing.
Okay. I'll fill Patty in. I think that's a good idea unless there's somebody that sees a problem with it. The only downside is that there wouldn't be a community meeting, which I think is, they've been reasonably well attended, but hopefully that'll be well attended too. And we'll get some folks that see value in helping us out. Ag. I don't know, Rich, anything on the ag department other than in your own farm?
Not on the ag. I do have something on advocacy lobbying.
Okay.
I sent an email to Jules, who's announced her candidacy for West Lynn and wished her well. So that's happening with Russ choosing not to run for another term. And Bill, I don't know if you want to mention the card that got sent out. Bill Mart?
Yeah,
about
the card
to Herb.
Oh, yeah. That helps that you threw Herb in. One of our longtime residents, Herb Koss, his wife, Joan, Herb's been fighting some real serious health issues for a while now, and so both he and his wife have been fighting Herb's health issues, and then she was attacked in her home in Lake Oswego, and is recovering, but we as a board sent a card letting him know we're thinking of him and hoping that this is the end of awful things happening to them, and it's better times ahead. Anyway, overwhelming challenges that they faced recently. So yeah, the board recognized that and let them know we care.
I've got another thing.
Sure.
And that's the VRF Road Funds Committee update. I got an email, and everything's going okay, but there's less revenue than expected for the vehicle registration fees based on what's happening with COVID. And so the dollars coming in for this fiscal year are going to be impacted based on lower fee generation. We have no truly idea yet how that affects all those projects, but just the fact that it's less than they expected.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that all government entities are in high alert scramble mode, trying to figure out how they're going to get the stuff done that they have to get done versus the things that they'd like to get done. Thanks. That's good to know. On agriculture, I've got a letter, email sent out to Rowan Steele, who is I think it's Headwaters, the East Multnomah County Soil and Water Conservation District farm that they kind of grow young, interested farmers or nurture them, I guess would be a more farm-like term. And I'd like to, either have a sit down with him and find out how they did what they did, because I think there's a lot of land in our area that people would, maybe be interested in participating in something like that. But I'm not real clear how all that happened. We've talked about this collectively, but anyway, I'll let you know what happens. And if we do some kind of a Zoom conference, certainly get everybody in the loop. The only other thing I had on my list besides, well, there's a couple more things, but Katie Kreider, I think, reached out after our last meeting and contacted Westland Wilsonville schools about Dollar Street, and it didn't sound like there was much room, but you tell them if you would, Katie, what came out of that effort.
Well, we had invited them to share their presentation on Dollar Street, kind of where they were with the design development of it at this meeting. And they declined to do that primarily because they have had multiple community meetings already, and they have a very limited budget as far with their consultants on how much time that they can all spend doing presentations to the community. So they asked us to, in lieu of a formal presentation, review all of their online materials and their list of answers to community questions to see and to confirm that that's covered our concerns from the Stafford Hamlet as far as, and we had some specific questions regarding their consultants' kind of studies, if you will, that indicated that they used to indicate that they needed to build the new school as far as growth projections. Anyway, so they declined to present to us. That's all I know.
Thanks. We do have John Keith, who I think attended a C4 meeting, and Rick, a CCI, as well as a CPO summit, along with Lynn and myself at the CPO summit. You two folks want to kind of fill folks in as far as the C4 CCI, what occurred in those?
I'll go first. I mean, thank you to Jana for sending out the draft letter from the coordination committee. A lot of the issues, concerns that they raised were discussed this evening. So hopefully you get a chance to review that. Of course, I think if there's other issues, concerns that weren't addressed either tonight or in the C4 letter, then we should probably write our own letter, since we have till September 15th. But it seems like the county really covered the waterfront here, and I think that well, I'll leave it up to the folks on the board whether or not we need to write additional letter. But I think between tonight and what the county's got to put together, I think we got it covered, except maybe for some few odds and ends. But Other than that, it was a pretty standard meeting.
I was impressed with the letter, by the way. I thought you guys definitely put something together that was well focused and addressed a lot of folks' concerns that we've heard. Rick?
I think maybe Wilson could maybe mention about the possible leaders meeting coming up, maybe?
Sure. We are working on confirming a date for a September community leaders meeting. We had discussed the possibility of using the regular meeting date of a meeting date and time with CCI, but we have some BCC members who are not available during that time, so we are looking at a couple other dates to determine the best time. It's challenging to find a meeting date and time where all of these people can come together, but the focus of this meeting will be DTD initiatives, Department of Transportation and Development. They have several things that are timely to talk to community leaders about. So as soon as we have a date confirmed, I'll send out a save the date to community leaders. These are the meetings that we normally do quarterly and serve dinner at and have the Board of County Commissioners come, and there's an open dialogue. We are doing our best to replicate that in a virtual arena, but you do have to provide your own dinner. But we do, all board members from the Hamlets and CPOs are invited, and our goals are to share information, to provide that open dialogue time with the board and county staff, and then hopefully ask that you all take that information back out into the communities and share what you learned at the meeting. Stay tuned for an official meeting date and agenda with what will be included during that meeting.
Thank you, Katie.
Sure.
Okay, Rick. CCI?
I think it's back to you, Bill.
There we go.
You're on mute.
Oh, I thought I made it go away. Thanks very much. CPO Summit. And I think this is kind of coordinated around a lot of different venues, not just the CPO Summit, but they're looking to move the transfer station in the next 4 to 6 years. And so they're reaching out to get feedback. It's evidently not going to be in Oregon City. So I don't know, those of you that grew up around here remember when the actual physical dump was in Oregon City, not across the street from where the transfer station is now. And so I guess probably Oregon City is giving a big wahoo that they aren't on the block again. But I'm not sure where they're going to relocate this thing. I think that's one of the challenges.
So Bill, I brought this up last meeting, but yeah, they're looking more toward the Estacada corridor from Route Road out that way. But they also said they have no properties that meet the conditions at this time, and you don't know where there might be a property that meet the conditions that they want. So they're really in a struggle mode to find a place that might work, and that's when I mentioned that. Why do they have to limit their boundary to an artificial one? Why they look outside? I'm not sure what the metro boundary is, but that seemed to be the real issue. Is there's no suitable property within that boundary?
Well, yeah, and the other criteria is they want it inside the urban growth boundary as it exists now, or maybe when it's going to be. And right. I'm assuming, because I'm seeing Len's finger wagging, that Len would like to say something. Take it, Len.
Right. One thing they covered was they have a look at the commercial area on 212 east of I-205 in the Clackamas area, as a possible location, and I don't see where they would work there, but again, they're back down to the point of not having any approved sites in the area. I asked about specifically south of the Willamette River off I-5 in Marion County, and they said, well, that's not even on the table. So they're hurting, but I don't know what they're going to do there either.
You're muted.
As it gets more densified, it's hard to find a piece of ground that will fit that need and will be acceptable to the community that's building up around it. So it's definitely a challenge. Yeah. So I mean, I don't know that there's anything else I have to add. Anybody else have anything on their notes or their docket that they want to say? Katie Kreider, is that a wave? Yes. Katie, you need to unmute yourself.
Yes. So regarding the letter that we sent to Westland Wilsonville regarding the the storage buildings that they presented at our last meeting. We have not gotten a response to my knowledge. Jana, have you seen anything? Because it was sent through our Stafford Hamlet account, and we have not gotten a response. I guess there's a question among us is like, how should we move forward with that? Should we give someone a call and say, you know, have you reviewed our letter? Do you have a formal response?
They've started demolishing the building already that's there.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, based on their presentation from last time, it sounded like what they presented to us was very schematic. It was very early on in, you know, design development is kind of their wording. And so I guess I would hope that we would get a response and that we would have an opportunity to reply again. Rich?
Well, my comment would be, are we considered a non-entity by them? And how long do we wait for a response instead of being, for lack of a better term, more proactive to ask why we haven't gotten a response? We are a legitimate organization.
Right. Exactly. That's kind of why we're asking the question right now. I feel like, you know,
so my answer would be yes, I think we should ask or send something else.
Well, and I think this is where we could ask Katie. You know, I asked earlier about who's the person we should contact in the county. I don't know what the process is, but maybe we can get a meeting with, I don't know who the right person is, but maybe we can get our meeting with the Hamlet with that person to talk about our concerns.
One thing we've got as far as what the county is concerned, we don't get a response from them until there's an application made for a conditional use permit. And so up until that time, we're just basically conversing with them as like another individual or person of the county. So until we get an actual application, we don't have any formal response that we make as a party.
I did put in an email earlier before the meeting started to county planning and our and my colleague who's Ellen Roglin, who's the communication liaison for Department of Transportation, to ask who we can connect you all with as far as a staff person overseeing that project. So I am not sure, but I will let you know as soon as I get a response.
Sure. I don't think there's any reason why we couldn't have an informal conversation and express our concerns.
Right. My question is if they're demolishing buildings, they should have a permit already, right? Technically.
You actually have to have a permit to tear buildings down these days.
Exactly. And so that's a good point. I mean,
yeah, again, I'm kind of guessing here, but you need a permit to tear a building down, but you don't need a conditional use until you want to put something up in its place. So
Yes.
that piece doesn't have any complexity around it, nor does it mean that they've necessarily passed all the hurdles to being able to build a new building. It just means that they're getting the old one out of the way. That, you know, typically you wouldn't do that until you had all your ducks in a row, but you know, that's evidently how they're not rolling that way. So,
Well, I guess my question to the board would be, what do you think is the best way to move forward? My feeling is a personal phone call to the appropriate person at Westland Wilsonville might be the best approach. The most personal approach, of course, as opposed to, because our letter that we sent was somewhat generic. It was from the Stafford Hamlet board. There wasn't a specific person that we designated for them to reply directly to. So anyway, I think maybe a phone call might be our first step. Does that seem appropriate?
I think that sounds fine. I think the only thing I'd say is whatever Katie comes back as to who is the planning department liaison or person responsible for the project, who's doing the oversight, maybe just have that conversation with them so you've got a little bit more background before you make the phone call to the folks at Westland Wilsonville. But that's, I mean, you could do it either way. I think, you know, the more ammunition we have, you know, the better off you probably are in a discussion.
I would second that. Know what permits have been pulled, you know, in the conversation. The other piece is, who at the district would you connect with, Katie?
Are you asking Katie Kreider or Wilson?
Or Katie Kreider. Are you thinking about making the call, or who would make the call from the board?
I don't know. I'm kind of putting it out there to the board. I mean, I know Bill, in our vote at the last meeting, he was kind of the one neutral party. So it's hard to ask him to make the call. So I'm not sure. I'm putting it out there. And it seems like, to me, I can't remember the gentleman's name. I don't have him in front of me, or the name in front of me, but there was a person that was designated as kind of in charge of managing all of the projects.
Right. And in fact, I think
Has
he was
stated that the older gentleman.
Well, there was an older gentleman, but there was the one, and he didn't speak, the older gentleman. There was.
The younger one's name was Reno, and I think he's the bond manager.
Correct. That's the person I was thinking of. Thanks, Jana.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess my 2 cents would be we should be proactive in communicating to them, since we haven't heard back and we're concerned and we're a legitimate organization. And I feel the pain now that's been discussed on the Westland City Council meetings in months past, that the school district doesn't get back to them. And if they are willing to ignore Westland City, then I would hope that, I guess, we're going to be ignored as well. And I don't think we should allow that to go until there's a conditional use application. They should know how strongly we would like some answers, appropriate answers, before they pull that. So is it the superintendent? Is it the bond guy? I think the bond guy is kind of probably couldn't give us any answers that would be sufficient for our questions. But that's just my 2 cents.
Would it be is there, I'm trying to think, I don't know how Westland Wilsonville is set up structurally, but like the business manager for the school district. I'm wondering.
I don't know if there's a school district business manager.
Yeah. There's the new Pat McGuff, the older gentleman from the meeting who took Tim Woodley's place and a different title. He said, I mean, he did say in the meeting, I'm happy to talk to you or whatever.
Well, let's start there then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, a phone call is less confrontational.
Mm-hmm.
He was already there. He heard this. he might not even know we sent an email or a letter.
Correct. It may not have been shared with everyone. It could have been totally ignored.
Who did the letter go to specifically?
Jana, do you remember who you?
I can't remember. I was trying to look it up, but I have to log into my computer to do it. I'll have to look. If you guys talk about something else, I'll see if.
Well, okay, I'm going to bring up one more thing then. I think, as this goes around, I think it would behoove us to have more than one person reach out for this phone call. I don't know how you guys feel about it. Maybe that's more problems than it's worth, but it feels like a level of earnestness on our part, and certainly not, so two can overpower one. I mean, it's a frickin' phone call, so it's just going to be discussions. But it takes some of the. I think from my standpoint, if I were one of those people, it would be a more relaxed conversation to have with two folks on one side. Particularly because as somebody correctly pointed out, I wasn't exactly jumping on the bandwagon for this, but that doesn't mean that it isn't the right thing. I mean, 8 of you thought it was a really good idea. So, and I'm happy to be one of those people. I just think there's probably people that have a better grip on this than I do. But I do think if at all possible, 2 folks in a conference call would have some advantage. I guess that's all I got.
Well, Rich Fiala, I know you were somewhat passionate about the issue as well.
Yeah, I can be one of the people.
Attaboy.
Yeah, lucky me. Teach me, won't it?
No.
You're a great talker.
Yeah.
You always cover all of your points really well.
Okay, so I don't know that I've got the gentleman's name. So Jana, you came up with it a minute ago.
Reno.
Yeah, so.
Reno's the younger guy, and then what's his face? Tim McGuff.
Yeah, when you get.
Why I am not even seeing it in here, and I have no idea. It probably got deleted or something.
Well, I think we all got the email of the draft, did we not? The final draft.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
So we have names. Do we have contact information?
Here it is. Okay. So we sent it to Amanda Blackburn. Actually, we sent it to like 8 or 10 people.
School district.
All members of the school board, and then other people who were there that night.
So we did send it to the people that were there.
Including Reno and McGuff. The only response we did get was from one school board member who just said, thanks for the letter. Our policy is for the only the school board president or chair to respond on behalf of the board.
There you go. There's a person.
But that's just on the board, school board, not related to the bond and the program manager.
So we can talk to the bond gentleman, Reno, and then McGuff, huh? Okay.
Yes.
So does anybody want to be my tag partner on this then?
Go, Katie Kreider.
Sure.
Okay, Katie.
Thank you both.
Talk offline and organize.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
I'm gonna forward it to you so
Yes,
that you
please.
see who it went to, just so you've got a copy.
Thanks, Jana.
Thank you.
Thank you for talking to them.
Yeah. Okay, anybody got anything else? If not, then meeting is adjourned. Thanks all of you for being here and being involved.
Hey, Garrett, don't cut us off yet. Jane, are you there?
I'm here.
So we need to talk about that.
About?
The mower.
Yeah, the mower. Okay.
Tomorrow.
All right, I'll email you.
That'd be awesome.
Returned an email and I haven't, and I'm going to return one to you. Okay.
Thanks. Take care, Jane.
You
See
too.
you, everybody.
Bye.
Hey, Bill.
Everybody.
Bill marked.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bill, don't hang up.
Don't hang up.
I had a question.
Okay.
I didn't know that it was, did you say it was Herb Koss's wife who was attacked in Lake Oswego? I hadn't heard that, so I just wanted to confirm that I wasn't hearing things. That's awful.
Yeah, no. That's
She
Joan.
she ended up, after being attacked by a woman, with 12 broken ribs, facial plastic surgery, mouth. She's leaving ICU tomorrow.
Oh my
God. She has communicated with Herb, he's been fighting pancreatic cancer for over a year. So it's a terrible tragedy to the whole family.
I'm so sorry to hear that. I just wanted to make sure I didn't misunderstand what you said.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, sorry to keep everyone on. Thank you so much. You guys had a great meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you, Katie and Garrett.
Yeah.
Thank you for attending.
Yeah, and don't have a wicked dangerous commute home, Katie Wilson. All right.